My older son, Brian, struggled with addiction for almost 10 years. And tragically, on October 20th, 2011, I was woken up in the middle of the night by a phone call that he had died.
I had doctors that I would go to at pain clinics that would write me prescriptions, knowing full well I was an addict.
I've overdosed twice. The first time it had to be fentanyl. The second time I overdosed was straight fentanyl. All I remember is putting on the radio, listening to music, and have a butt.
The internet is littered with stories like these. The narratives of the victims of opioid overprescription fill our timelines, news feeds, and Google searches. And while this may be very sad, it's an extremely important phenomenon because it's listening to stories like these that improves the standard of healthcare in the United States. The best healthcare providers understand these stories and use them to treat their patients most effectively. Furthermore, you could even make the argument that without the ability to interpret stories properly, a healthcare provider will never be able to maximize the efficacy of their care. And while the storytelling-based relationship between a doctor and the patient is the foundation of healthcare, these stories are often not confined to this relationship, and in fact are often best used when spread to the general public. This is most often done in the form of public service announcements or public health campaigns. Mothers Against Drunk Driving, Above the Influence, and the Truth Initiative are all organizations that have tried to spread the narratives of past victims of dangerous behavior in hopes at curbing these behaviors in the future. However, the opioid epidemic has no such well-known national campaign. For my major storytelling research project, I wanted to look at the stories of the victims of opioid overprescription to see how these stories have been used in the past and can be used in the future to limit the impact of this problem. To study this, I want to focus on 4 central problems. What's the status of the opioid epidemic today? Would a platform for sharing their stories help current victims overcome their addiction? Would the sharing of these stories help prevent future victims? And how would I design a public health campaign to help with this problem? Answering this first question yielded few surprises. For this, I first turned to Manchaconti and his fellow investigators for their summary of the opioid epidemic in the United States today. And we can see from their review that this problem is fairly severe. Their citation of the 2010 National Survey on Drug Use and Health showed that 8.9% of Americans aged 12 or older were currently or in the past month illicit drug users. And 7 million of these individuals in this past month had used psychotherapeutic drugs. And this is having a significant impact on mortality, as we can see in this graph that shows overdose from opioids is on the rise. Furthermore, they also provide this fairly confusing graph that tries to break down the source of these opioids and ultimately concludes that a large portion of the drugs causing these overdoses are coming directly or indirectly from a physician. But while the situation looks bleak, the answers to my second and third question provide hope. A study by McIntosh and McKaganey showed that allowing these addicts to share their stories helps with their recovery process. They first note how self-identity is bound up with the fragile nature of the biography which the individual supplies about herself. This means, by sharing this biography, the victim is allowed to reinterpret their addict lifestyle, reconstruct their sense of self, and provide explanations for their own recovery, ultimately leading to a quicker and more lasting recovery. And sharing these stories doesn't just help past victims, but also helps prevent future victims as well. In an article from Fox News Health, we see how families are using the obituaries of their past loved ones to spread the message of the dangers of opioid overprescription. This is done by the families so that their loved one's passing will not have been in vain, and has been shown to have a lasting impact on the nearby community. This lasting impact is evidenced by several things, such as the media.
The Centers for Disease Control and Prevention wants doctors to back off giving the highly addictive drugs to patients with chronic pain. The director said overprescribing these medications is a key driver of the country's drug overdose epidemic.
The speeches of prominent political figures.
And opioid overdose deaths have nearly quadrupled since 1999. This is a total epidemic.
On both sides of the political spectrum.
Removed. They got 50 very strong pain-killing drugs. And these drugs are rampant. Kids are using them, getting addicted, then getting into heroin.
And even figures from pop culture.
I'm an addict. In my life, I've abused numerous drugs, including the painkillers, Oxycontin, and Percocet. And I'm not alone.
But this raised awareness is just the beginning. If sharing the obituaries of fallen victims and the stories of those still fighting the epidemic have gotten us this far, just imagine what an organized public health campaign, or PSA, could do for this problem. So the question remains, if I were to design this PSA, what would be the structure? And what narratives would I include? For these answers, I have to turn to a study coming out of Johns Hopkins School of Public Health looking at the effects of competing narratives on public perceptions of opioid pain reliever addiction during pregnancy. This study looked at the effect of narrative on public perception and perceived culpability, and specifically researched how differences in narratives changed public attitudes towards women addicted to opioids during pregnancy. They found that socioeconomic status, barriers to treatment, and success of the treatment all affected public perception of this situation. They concluded that women of higher socioeconomic status, those that had overcome barriers to recovery, and those who were able to successfully and efficiently overcome their addiction were viewed most favorably by audiences. This information is crucial in structuring a PSA of my own. I would like to organize a series of 10 commercials aimed at impacting men and women aged 12 to 30 to be played before online videos on websites such as YouTube and major news outlets. Each video will be narrative-based, tell the story of first exposure, discuss the rock bottom moment of the victim, and explain the outcome of seeking treatment or not seeking treatment, depending on the victim. In terms of which narratives we will choose, we want to maximize audience impact by choosing a diverse subject base with a wide age range. We would also like to maximize relatability to our audience by focusing largely on subjects from middle to upper middle class and using individuals that have overcome obstacles in their treatment. And in terms of outcomes, we want to tell the stories of those who underwent recovery after seeking treatment and those who passed after not seeking treatment. A public health campaign such as this would hopefully be one of the first steps in reducing the impact of this epidemic in the United States. Thank you.